All right. Hey everyone, and welcome back to Everyday English Pod. Today we're getting into something that I think is absolutely essential for anyone learning English or really tackling any kind of challenge, and that's believing in yourself. You guys sent in some really interesting stuff, a conversation really all about how that self-belief can be such a powerful driver of success.
It is. It is.
And so, our mission today is to really unpack those core ideas and pull out some practical advice that you can start applying to your own journey, right away.
That's exactly right. We're going to explore how shifting your mindset in this way and thinking about self-belief can lead to really some pretty significant personal growth. And it can help you sort of push through those inevitable challenges that you're going to face and ultimately, unlock more of your potential. And we'll do that, like you said, by drawing directly from those insights that you sent to us.
Awesome. So let's jump right in. One of the things that really stood out to me from what you sent over is this idea that self-belief is kind of like the foundation. It's really that bedrock that everything else is built on. Why is that inner confidence so fundamental?
Yeah, so I think one of the things that's really fascinating here, and I think you're right, your sources touched on this, is that self-belief is more than just, this fleeting positive thought.
Yeah.
It's not just like, oh, I'm feeling good today. It's a deeper, it's more resilient conviction in your own ability to act effectively, even when things get tough.
Yeah.
It's that internal, like, I can handle this, that really makes a difference in how you approach situations.
Totally. It's like it acts as a springboard, As I was reading through the conversation you sent, it really highlighted how, when you've got that self-assurance, you're way more likely to just jump on opportunities,
Right.
Feeling comfortable enough to share your ideas in a meeting, for example, which I know is something you're working on, or just approaching a challenge with that kind of I've got this attitude.
Yeah, absolutely. And if we connect this to the bigger picture of your English learning and your career goals, I mean, that confidence isn't just a nice to have, right? It really, it permeates everything.
Yeah.
The more you trust in your ability to learn and adapt, the more willing you are to take on new responsibilities, to push yourself a little outside of that comfort zone, and ultimately to see real progress in both your English and your professional life.
Totally. And here's where it gets really interesting, and something I hadn't thought about quite this way before. The material you sent also points out that self-belief almost has this contagious effect.
It does, yeah.
When you genuinely believe in yourself and your capabilities, other people around you are more likely to believe in you too.
Yeah, that brings up a really important point about how we interact with each other, and confidence projects outwards.
Right.
When people see that, you're sure of your abilities, they tend to feel more secure in what you can do. They're more inclined to offer their support and trust.
Right.
It sets up this really positive cycle.
Yeah, totally. It's like a self-fulfilling prophecy, but in a really good way, right?
Exactly, yeah.
And then thinking about, all the bumps in the road, self-belief seems absolutely crucial for bouncing back, right? The conversation you shared really highlighted how that inner conviction helps you recover from setbacks. Like I'm thinking about, just how frustrating it can be when you feel like your English isn't improving as fast as you'd like.
Sure.
But if you have that self-belief, it's easier to kind of get back on track.
Yeah, I think what's really vital to understand here, and again, your sources emphasize this, is that progress is rarely a straight line. There are always going to be moments where you feel stuck or you make mistakes. But when you have that underlying belief in yourself, that ability to say, okay, this didn't go the way I planned, but I'll figure it out. I'll learn from this. I'll try again.
Right.
That's what fuels you to keep going, to learn from those experiences, and to ultimately persevere.
Totally. Okay, so we're on the same page about why self-belief is so important, especially, for you and your goals. But the big question is, how do we actually build that?
Right.
The material you sent had some really practical steps, and I'd love to dive into those with you. One of the first ones that stood out to me was setting small, achievable goals.
Yeah, that's a really foundational strategy, and one that aligns with a lot of what we know about building new skills, like learning English.
Right.
The idea is to create this series of small wins. When you set a goal that's within reach and you actually achieve it, that success gives you a little boost of confidence, right? And think about it with English. Maybe setting a goal to learn just 3 new words every day, or to have one short conversation in English.
Right.
Each time you hit those small targets, you're reinforcing that belief that you can learn and grow.
Right. It's like building momentum, one small step at a time.
Exactly.
And it's not just about setting the goals, but also taking a moment to actually recognize those small victories. The material also mentions celebrating progress, no matter how tiny it might seem.
Oh, absolutely.
Even if you just felt a little bit more comfortable understanding a movie in English than you did last week or something.
Absolutely. It's so easy to overlook those incremental improvements, but actually acknowledging your effort and giving yourself credit is really crucial for staying motivated, for building that underlying self-belief over time.
Yeah.
If you manage to understand, a tricky grammar point you were struggling with, take a moment to appreciate that progress.
Yeah, I love that. Another key point that came up was reframing how we think about mistakes.
Right.
Instead of seeing them as these huge failures, the advice was to really try to learn from them, to see them as opportunities for growth. That shifting perspective sounds really powerful, especially with language learning where, you're bound to make errors.
Yeah, it fundamentally changes how you approach challenges. Instead of dwelling on what went wrong and feeling like you failed, you shift into more of an analytical mindset. Okay, that didn't go as I hoped.
Yeah.
What can I learn from this experience?
Right.
Each mistake then becomes a valuable piece of information, contributing to your growth and ultimately boosting your confidence and your ability to navigate similar situations in the future.
Right. Makes total sense. And it's not just about what's going on inside our own heads.
Right.
The people that we surround ourselves with, they play a huge role too. And the conversation you shared really emphasized the importance of, getting that positive reinforcement from friends and family and colleagues.
It is. I mean, the social environment is incredibly influential. When you're around people who believe in you and offer encouragement, those like you got this moments, it can be a really powerful reminder of your own strength, especially when you're dealing with that self-doubt.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Their belief in you can act as a really significant boost to your own self-confidence.
Totally. On the flip side, one of the biggest threats to self-belief seems to be constantly comparing ourselves to others.
Oh, it's so true. Yeah.
And the material you sent made a really strong case against doing that. I know it's something a lot of language learners struggle with when they see others, progressing at a different pace.
Yeah, and I think what's critical to remember, and your sources really, really hit on this, is that everyone is on their own unique journey. They have their own set of strengths and challenges and timelines.
Right.
And comparing yourself to others can be incredibly damaging to your self-esteem. Instead, the focus really needs to be on your own progress, celebrating your individual achievements.
Yeah.
No matter how small they might seem when you look at someone else's perceived success. Ask yourself, what have I learned today? How have I improved my English this week?
Totally. It's about running your own race. And then there was the point about embracing failure as a learning opportunity, which ties right back into not being afraid of making mistakes.
It does, yeah.
It's seeing it as a stepping stone on the path, not the final destination, right?
Exactly. If you can shift your perspective on failure from a negative judgment about yourself to an integral part of the learning and growth process, it loses its power to hold you back. Instead, it becomes something that can actually propel you forward.
I love that. And this leads nicely into the idea of avoiding perfectionism, right?
Oh, yeah.
That pressure to be absolutely flawless can be so paralyzing, especially when you're trying to speak a new language, right? You don't want to sound silly. You don't want to, feel like you're messing up all the time.
Perfectionism can create so much unnecessary pressure and anxiety,
Right.
And often this leads to procrastination or even a fear of trying in the first place.
Yeah.
The focus really should be on doing your best at each step and understanding that improvement is a continuous process.
Yeah.
It's not some state of absolute flawlessness you have to achieve right away.
Yeah. I love that. The sources you shared also reminded us of how important it is to kind of look back at our past successes.
Oh, absolutely.
Right. Even if we're facing challenges right now, we've all overcome obstacles in the past, whether it was learning a tricky grammar concept or giving a presentation in English that felt daunting at the time.
That's a really powerful way to ground yourself in your own capabilities,
Yeah.
When self-doubt starts to creep in, consciously recalling those those past instances where you faced difficulties and came out successfully on the other side, it provides this tangible evidence of your resilience and your ability to achieve your goals.
Right.
It's like reminding yourself, hey, I've tackled tough things before, so I can handle this too.
Totally. And in a more practical sense, the conversation you listened to highlighted the role that preparation plays in boosting confidence.
It does, yeah.
Feeling well prepared for a task like a presentation in English or even just a casual conversation can really increase your self-assurance.
Yeah, when you've put in the work to prepare thoroughly, you naturally feel more secure and ready to tackle that challenge, right? And that feeling of preparedness directly translates into increased confidence and a greater likelihood of success.
Right. And then finally, on the topic of building self-belief, the sources mentioned the use of affirmations. Those positive statements we can say to ourselves like, I'm a capable English speaker, or I can understand more and more each day.
Yeah, affirmations are a really useful tool for kind of reprogramming your mindset, by consciously repeating those positive statements about yourself and your abilities. You start to internalize those beliefs, and writing them down can often make them even more effective.
Right.
It makes them feel more real. And the key is to really tailor those affirmations to your specific needs.
Right.
If you're working on your pronunciation, an affirmation like "my pronunciation is improving every day" can be particularly helpful.
Right.
Importantly, affirmations can also serve as these regular reminders of the progress you've already made.
So we're looking at building self-belief through small wins, positive self-talk, celebrating progress, learning from mistakes, surrounding ourselves with support, avoiding comparisons, embracing failure, letting go of perfectionism, remembering past successes, preparing thoroughly, and using affirmations. That's a pretty comprehensive set of tools.
It is.
But what happens when those inevitable challenges to our self-belief pop up?
Right.
The sources you shared touched on things like self-doubt and fear of failure. How do we kind of navigate those moments?
It's really important to recognize that self-doubt is a completely normal part of being human.
Right.
It's not about trying to eliminate it entirely, but more about how you choose to respond when it surfaces.
Right.
Actively reminding yourself of your goals and your capabilities can be really helpful in countering those negative thoughts. When fear of failure starts to creep in, try to reframe it in your mind as an opportunity to learn and grow rather than a final judgment on your worth.
Right. That makes a lot of sense. It's about consciously changing that internal dialogue we have with ourselves, right? The conversation also mentioned dealing with negative thoughts more generally, like challenging them and trying to replace them with more positive and fact-based statements.
Exactly. When a negative thought pops into your head, take a moment to question its validity. Ask yourself, is this really true? What evidence do I actually have to support this thought? Often you'll find that these negative thoughts are based more on assumptions than on hard facts. And actively try to counter that negativity by focusing on gratitude, making a mental list of things you've achieved or things you appreciate in your life can be a surprisingly powerful way to shift your focus.
Yeah, absolutely. Another potential pitfall that was highlighted is seeking too much external approval.
Right.
And while getting feedback on your English is definitely valuable, your underlying sense of self-worth shouldn't hinge solely on what other people think.
Yeah, while seeking feedback can be really helpful for your development, it's important to cultivate an internal sense of self-worth that isn't totally dependent on the opinions of others, right?
Right.
Your value as a person and even your progress in learning English, it isn't solely determined by external validation. Focus on your own journey, your efforts and your personal growth.
Right. And going back to that comparison trap, it seems like it's not just about feeling inadequate when we look at others, but also how that constant comparison can actually fuel our own doubts and fears about our abilities.
Yeah, the tendency to constantly compare ourselves to others can really amplify those feelings of self-doubt and fear.
Right.
It's essential to consciously redirect that focus back to your own individual progress and to celebrate your personal achievements,
Yeah.
no matter how it might stack up against someone else's perceived success.
Right. Now, self-belief isn't just some passive state of mind, is it? The sources you shared really emphasized the power of taking action and
Right.
and being consistent in building that belief. It's not just about thinking I can, but actually putting in the effort.
Yeah, that's a really fundamental point.
Right.
Self-belief isn't just built on positive thoughts floating around in your head.
Mm.
It's significantly strengthened by actually taking action.
Mm.
Even if you don't feel completely confident speaking English, just starting to practice, even in small ways, will actually build your belief in your ability to learn and communicate.
Right.
Action provides tangible evidence of your capability.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
It's almost like that saying, fake it till you make it, but with real effort and practice backing it up.
Right, yeah.
Right. And taking those small, consistent steps, like writing a short paragraph in English every day, really builds trust in yourself over time.
Consistent action, it creates a track record of achievement, even if the individual steps seem small.
Right.
And this builds a solid foundation of self-trust. Similarly, intentionally pushing yourself a little outside of your comfort zone, even in small ways, like joining an English conversation group when you feel a little nervous, can significantly boost your confidence.
Yeah. And that consistency in learning, even if it's just, dedicating a small amount of time each day to studying or practicing, really creates momentum.
It does, yeah.
It makes it easier to kind of keep going and reinforces that sense of, I'm doing this.
Yes, that daily practice, even if it's just for 10 or 15 minutes, it builds a sense of forward movement, right?
Mm-hmm.
It establishes learning as a regular part of your routine, which in turn reinforces your self-belief. And persistence is absolutely vital.
Right.
Viewing challenges not as roadblocks, but as opportunities to learn and grow is really key to maintaining that consistency.
Totally. Totally. So having a routine helps make self-belief a more natural part of our journey. And then taking a step back every now and then to reflect on how far we've come, that also provides concrete proof that our efforts are actually making a difference.
Absolutely. Regularly taking stock of your progress reinforces the value of your efforts and fuels your belief in your continued ability to grow and improve.
Absolutely. The sources you shared also highlighted the really crucial role that support systems and positive habits play in nurturing self-belief. It's not just about our own individual efforts, but also who and what we surround ourselves with, right?
Yeah, your environment really does have a significant impact. Surrounding yourself with positive influences, people who encourage you and believe in your potential can provide a crucial buffer against those moments of self-doubt.
Right.
Cultivating gratitude for the learning resources you have and the support you receive further reinforces a positive mindset. And as we've discussed, consciously embracing failure as a natural part of the process and developing positive habits, like reading in English or keeping a journal, these things create consistency and really reinforce your capabilities.
Yeah. And those habits can become even more powerful if we intentionally link them with small rewards, right? To help us stay motivated.
Absolutely, yeah.
It can turn something that feels like a chore into something we actually look forward to.
Yeah, that positive reinforcement is so key to sustaining motivation over the long term.
Totally.
And building a strong support system by connecting with other English learners, whether online or in person, provides valuable opportunities to seek and offer constructive feedback and to celebrate each other's victories, creating a really encouraging sense of shared progress.
I love that. Now, staying motivated isn't always easy, especially when we do hit those inevitable setbacks in our language learning journey. The conversation you shared offered some really good strategies for maintaining that drive and overcoming those hurdles. What were some of those that stood out to you?
Well, I mean, setting those small achievable goals we talked about earlier is absolutely crucial for maintaining motivation. Regularly tracking your progress allows you to visually see how far you've come, which can be a really powerful source of encouragement.
Yeah.
Celebrating milestones, both the big ones and the small ones, reinforces your efforts.
Right.
Connecting your language learning to something personally meaningful, like a desire to travel or connect with people from different cultures, can provide a really strong underlying motivation. And when those setbacks inevitably happen, reframing them as learning opportunities is absolutely essential.
Yeah, it's about consciously focusing on the effort we're putting in, not just the ultimate outcome.
Right.
And not being afraid to seek support from others when we need it.
Absolutely.
Giving ourselves permission to take a break and recover when we're feeling discouraged is also important, right?
Right.
And trying to stay positive by focusing on what we can do and practicing patience with ourselves throughout the process. All these things contribute to maintaining that motivation.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's a really holistic approach that combines setting realistic goals, practicing self-compassion, and keeping your focus on progress rather than aiming for some unrealistic ideal of perfection.
Totally, totally. Finally, the sources you shared touched on the broader impact that self-belief can have, extending beyond just our own personal journeys and goals. What did they say about that?
Well, I think what's really inspiring here is the understanding that your own self-belief can have this incredible ripple effect. It can inspire others around you. It can create stronger connections through more open and confident communication. It can make you a positive role model for others and ultimately contribute to collective progress within communities.
Right.
When you operate from a place of genuine self-assurance, it can really empower those around you as well.
Totally, totally. And when we're facing those really specific doubts and fears that can kind of chip away at our self-belief, what are some effective ways to really tackle those head on?
Right.
Like, for example, that fear of making mistakes when speaking English.
Yeah, so I think the first step is often to really identify those specific fears. Are you afraid of making mistakes, of being misunderstood, of facing criticism?
Right.
Once you have a clearer understanding of the root of that doubt, you can consciously focus on your strengths and the progress you've already made.
Mm-hmm. Taking those big, intimidating challenges and breaking them down into smaller, more manageable steps can make them feel less overwhelming. Practicing mindfulness can be helpful for staying present in the moment and reducing anxiety about future outcomes.
Mm-hmm.
Preparing thoroughly for specific situations like a presentation or a meeting can directly address fears that stem from feeling unprepared. And it's also really important to remember that feeling scared or nervous often means you're pushing yourself outside of your comfort zone, which is actually a really positive sign of growth.
Right. So it's about understanding our specific fears, consciously focusing on our strengths, taking things one small step at a time, trying to stay present, preparing as much as possible, and recognizing that feeling a little uncomfortable often means we're on the right track.
Exactly. Yeah.
And all of this ties into the importance of having a plan, but also being flexible and willing to adjust when things don't go exactly as we expect. Yeah, setting specific achievable goals and breaking them down into smaller actionable steps, it really provides a roadmap for your journey.
Mm-hmm.
Regularly tracking your progress and rewarding yourself for reaching milestones helps to keep your motivation high. Visualizing your future success can be a powerful way to reinforce your commitment.
Yeah.
However, it's equally important to remain flexible and be willing to adjust your plan when necessary.
Yeah.
Life and language learning often throws curveballs, and the ability to adapt is a really key component of long-term success and sustained self-belief.
Okay, so what does this all mean for you, the learner? Believing in yourself isn't like flipping a switch.
Right.
It's more like building a muscle.
It is.
You strengthen it with every small success you achieve, with every lesson you learn from a mistake, and with every consistent effort you put in.
We've really dug into some fascinating ideas from what you shared with us today. The power of that internal positive self-talk, the importance of taking the time to celebrate those small victories along the way, and that crucial understanding that setbacks are simply a natural part of the overall journey.
Absolutely, absolutely. Think about just one or two of these practical tips that really resonated with you. Maybe it's deciding to set one tiny, achievable English-related goal for this week, or making a conscious effort to replace a negative thought with a more positive affirmation.
Consider this.
Yeah.
What's one small action you can take today that will actively water that seed of self-belief within you? It doesn't have to be a huge thing, just a single step forward.
Thank you so much for joining us here on Everyday English Pod for this exploration of self-belief. Keep going, keep learning, and most importantly, keep believing in your incredible ability to succeed.